underrated, I think, is people doing like crazy rudiment shit. Like, go back to marching band. I don't care. Like,
What is up, my friends? Thanks for tuning in again. This is the Scoped Exposure Podcast. I always love being able to, document, I guess, where I'm finding out about certain bands through this podcast as well. Most people that have been following So for a long time know that we also film bands and, document bands and people in different projects that way. And it's been cool to kind of do that through proxy through the podcast. And very early in the podcast days, I had Rachel from ANKLEBITER on the episode and talked to them. This was right around when the demo came out, and it was getting the privilege of getting to see that band just absolutely crush it at Flower Fest before it was called Act Like You Know. And with the new record that just came out, I definitely wanted to do kind of a second ANKLEBITER episode. When I reached out to Rachel, they were like, you got to talk to Nick. He's the man. So I'm really excited today to be welcoming Nick from ANKLEBITER and Ultimatum on the Scoped Exposure Podcast. Thanks for joining me, man.
Yo, what's up? Thank you for having me, Spencer. I really appreciate it.
Of course, man. So I don't know how familiar you are with our show, but we always like to check a bev before we get into the, the music discussions. It sounds like you're ready to go. So how about you tell the people at home what you're going to be sipping on?
Yeah. So I hit my favorite local coffee spot in the morning, made sure I had a fresh drink for the podcast, obviously. Mm-hmm. I have a lavender thyme espresso tonic. So lavender syrup, a little bit of thyme, 3 shots of espresso over tonic water. It's delicious.
Wow. Oh, that is bougie as ever.
Yeah.
You really treat yourself like 10 a.m. first thing in the morning.
Yeah. Rarely do I have a day off where it's kind of just like, oh, I can do stuff for me. So when I do have a day like today where it's just like, I've got this on my plate and then my girlfriend and I are going to go on a hike and just like hang out. I like to treat myself to a nice coffee and sort of set the tone for the day.
Yeah. Really. I love how the bev kind of sets the tone for the rest of the day. It's not your mindset or it's the drink in hand for sure.
Yeah. You know how people like dress to their mood? I like to drink to my mood as well.
You are my guy. Yeah, it's funny that you say because I've been working at a coffee spot recently, just being out here in Ontario, and we have a few like flavor shots, and a lot of people swear by the lavender, and I've kind of been hating on it because I'm like, that sounds just like, why would I just put like rose petals and dirt into my coffee? But you seem to be, team lavender, so to speak.
So I'm really not a team lavender guy. I don't like a lavender latte that much, but for whatever reason, with the time, it sort of makes it a little earthier. And then over an espresso tonic, it's not that like thick. I don't know. Lavender is such a light flavor to me. So when you mix it into a latte that's kind of thick and like, I don't know, it doesn't mix well for me. So this is a nice, light, like refreshing drink.
Right. So when it comes to like coffee drinks and just beverages in general, like, are you someone that will get something like that to kind of start off your bev day, or are you like I need coffee the minute that I'm conscious first?
I'm that guy.
Something like that. Okay.
Yeah, I'm a black coffee guy, like through and through. If it's like I'm treating myself, I'll get like a cool drink like this, but I'd say 6 out of 7 days of the week, it's black coffee all day.
I'm the exact same way. It's always second coffee is the one where maybe I'll get a dirty chai or maybe I'll get a latte or something like that. But usually it's the very first one needs to be pour over black coffee or an Americano that's the fanciest it will ever get.
Yeah. Usually it's cold brew to start my day. And then my second coffee will be an Americano.
Yeah. Great choices. We seem to be on the same bev wavelength here.
I appreciate it.
I am not drinking coffee myself for this episode, but I am drinking something that's kind of brand new. So, In addition to documenting bands, I document all my bev journeys and explorations. So I'm drinking a brand called G's Louise.
Ooh,
So it's a prebiotic sparkling water, and it's their grapefruit and basil flavor.
wow.
So
That sounds
similar where you
delicious.
have, some time in yours. I got some basil in mine. Um,
Awesome.
I just love any like the fact that there's a bev called G's Louise is just like who
Yeah.
like someone had to get that name for something at the very
Yeah.
least.
The can looks cool
So
too, so I appreciate
yes,
that.
exactly. Yeah, I love how the G here kind of like bleeds into the O of
Yeah.
Louise. So
I'm a font nerd, so that's awesome.
you're a font nerd. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, dude, thanks again for coming on the show. Cheers to
Cheers.
you.
I appreciate it.
Did you just slam your coffee on your desk like?
Yeah.
I know
OS.
ankle biter is a straight edge man, but that's a very like non-edge
Yeah.
thing to do.
I'm probably like I think I'm the only one in ankle biter with like real like drug or alcohol experience in my life. So that's just like force of habit.
I get that. It is like outside of anything that might be tied to, it is like a cool thing to do. Like sometimes
Yeah.
when I'm like, because I'm a very like casual like drinker when it comes to that kind
Yeah.
of stuff. So when I go out, I like totally forget that that's even a thing. I'm like, man, I kind of wish I did that, and then I totally forget for the
Yeah.
next time and repeat and repeat.
However you do is how you do it.
Yeah, I will
How
say
is
though,
it?
it's very delicious. I think grapefruit is like kind of the benchmark like good fruit kind of flavor to do for a
I
sparkling
agree.
water, but the basil it like makes it less like like oh we're just trying to be like super sweet. It's like kind of like oh
Yeah.
this is an actual healthy drink. So shout out to the G's and the Louise.
Is that Canadian only, do we think?
Yeah, I should kind of plug where they're from. So it is made in Canada, made in Toronto. So yeah,
Cool.
the super local from where we're at. So I'll have to get more. I've only
Yeah.
seen it once in my time here at like one specific spot. So
Interesting.
yeah. I kind of have a rule of I think I have a new rule of thumb in life where it's like if something is so unique, whether it's you're at a grocery store, you're at like a market, and you're like, I literally will never see this again. It almost has to be purchased because then
Yeah.
otherwise, it's gonna get swept off into the wind, right?
It's a good rule of thumb. Because I mean,
Mhm.
even if you hate it, you tried it and you know.
Yes, yeah. So Nick, since you're new here on the show, I always like to, a new guest who comes on the podcast kind of get a little bit of context about how they kind of got on the path that they're on, a little hardcore origin story kind of shit. So,
For sure.
tell me about like when you were first kind of discovering, like hardcore punk, whatever kind of first hit your radar and kind of put you on the path that you're on right now.
Yeah, for sure. So I feel like I had a very similar sort of storyline to a lot of people where I was into skateboarding when I was younger. I was a big Tony Hawk kid, so I was kind of familiar with like punk music as a concept, but I never really dove into the culture.
Mm.
And in middle school, when like everyone's kind of starting to figure themselves out, um, pretty much like my friend group was all diving into music and figuring things out. And we were very much like there was 5 of us that kind of just like hung out in each other's parents' basements, and it'd be like, all right, whose parents are gonna get the least mad if we play music tonight? And I was in a bunch of like really crappy, like we had no original songs, but just did as many covers as possible, like basement bands that we would just jam on the weekends.
Sure.
When I say everything, it was like 30 Seconds to Mars, Muse, but then we'd also do like Green Day or, just anything.
Yeah.
And sort of through that, like, oh, I like alternative music. I ended up finding Fall Out Boy in middle school, and that was sort of like my jumping off point to like, oh, there's like a little more aggressive leaning style of this music. And, hearing like screams on Fall Out Boy songs, I was like, what is this? Long story short, in high school, I kind of got in with like metalcore kids. And through that found bands like Title Fight, that were sort of along the fringe of, things I grew up listening to, but also there was this other world behind them. And then I remember hearing Bad Seed for the first time, and being like, what is this? And
Mhm.
that I sort of credit Bad Seed as like my jumping off point to like, oh, this is hardcore.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that I like, so that you used the term when you were just going back to the very first point that you said about like skateboarding and then just like punk kind of being like just a part of it but not its own thing. And I don't know if
Yeah.
that's like kind of where like hardcore, like especially for newer people who are getting into it, where like they kind of look at like certain things as like, oh, that's just like something that's a part of like this larger thing, versus
Yeah.
like kind of looking at bands and scenes and people who do this or that within the scene as like their own lore and things like that. So like using the skateboarding analogy, it's like I could see very easily how people might look at certain bands, but they're just viewing that as like the soundtrack versus like, no, these
Yes.
bands have their own legacy and their own lore and everything tied to it. Is that kind of like where you were initially when you were
Yeah,
kind
for
of?
sure. Because like I didn't know what a show was. Like to
Mhm.
me, like live music was like a concert that you had to like buy tickets to, and it was this grand event. And I thought, these bands were just like making music, and oh, it's they're part of the music for this video game or this movie, or I didn't realize really what subculture was to any degree,
Mhm.
until like late middle school, early high school when I started, I was just on the tail end of like MySpace and stuff like that. So I got to do a couple like deep dives of bands' MySpaces and stuff like that.
Yeah, I use the same differentiator when it was like, okay, I'm going to a concert and then I'm going to a show. And I
Yeah.
still kind of use that to a day, even though there are some shows that you go to, whether it's like a fest or even a bigger show that's pretty much concert level, but like
Right.
it's the way that you're viewing it as far as like the the dynamics of like when I go to a concert, I imagine I'm like buying seats where I might sit and watch a band
Yeah.
versus if I'm going to a show, um, like you said, like I might not even have tickets to the show, but I'm just buying it at the door. I'm not maybe going with someone because I know I'm going to run into a dozen other people that I know from the scene or the
Yeah.
bands who are coming to town. So it's just like a different mindset. And I hope that people who are getting into hardcore now are understanding there's a different dynamic from going to see Turnstile open up for Blink 182 versus, you know, seeing Turnstile at a FYA
Yes,
situation.
for sure. Yeah. Yeah. And like sort of zooming out on that, I've never really thought of that way, but like music has always sort of been a part of my life. And I think up until like my early teen years, it was sort of just like a soundtrack to me. Like it
Mhm.
was a part of my life, but it wasn't my life per se. And I didn't realize that you could sort of become all enveloped in music.
Yeah, yeah, which is like a very kind of it's very eye-opening when, you know, either people are making that very conscious decision of like, you know, not like this is going to be my personality for the rest of my life, but like
Yeah.
similar in that sense. And like there's a lot of things even in my day to day where it's like, you know, even in the more normie shit that I do, it's like I'm always thinking or like thinking how different things apply within this world that I feel so connected and a part of. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's pretty wild. So like you're kind of finding your way and kind of going like deeper down the rabbit hole. You're finding like the heavier and heavier music, and I can attest to like I think there were like certain bands where it's like I like I like these songs more because there is that screaming bridge or there is like more
Yeah.
of that in there. So you were just kind of had the bug in you of like trying to find the heavier and the heavier and the heavier.
Yeah. And it's funny because I definitely like went from like pop punk to hardcore, and then I kind of pivoted to I was really big into metalcore from like '09 to like 2012, where I really like bands like After the Burial and like Oceano and like that sort of wave of metalcore,
Hmm.
which I don't really listen to at all anymore. And like people who know me now are always shocked to hear that I like some of that stuff. We were just on tour and I put on After Burial in the band, and everyone was like, "What the hell is this?" Um, just because it's so out of character for me.
Right.
But yeah, those are sort of like the shows that I grew up going to as well, just because that was what was happening locally for
Hmm.
me.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that there's definitely like certain bands for me that are like, it's not that I don't like them anymore, but they're just like not the very first thing that I'm like trying to put on. And
Yeah.
if I go and listen to it now, it's more nostalgic for me, not like for the grand scheme
Yes.
of other people. But yeah, there's definitely certain things where it's like, you still listen to these bands, you know? Like I might like go out of my way to, if they were coming to town and tickets aren't like $1,000 or anything like that, but like there are certain things that I'm just more focused on and spending my time listening wise.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think with that, I kind of took it to such an extreme that at a certain point it kind of slingshotted and sort of later high school, like right out of high school, I found like the Lock and Out discography, and I was like, oh, you can still be aggressive and have mosh parts and stuff, but be the complete opposite of all of that, and
Hmm.
that's where I sort of fell in love with all of that.
Hmm. So let's kind of like shift back more like origin style questions, but more so about
Yeah,
you and drumming. Was
yeah.
like drums kind of like the first thing that you were doing? Did you like dabble in something else? It's it's the classic thing with anyone in any band. It's like whose house can we like make the most noise at
Yes.
without doing that? So I'm curious if your parents were like, "There's no way you're making noise at our house," or if you were the person that was like, "I can get away with
No,
either
I had the
hitting the
cool
skins."
parents.
Okay.
For sure. Yeah, drums weren't the first instrument I picked up. I played viola growing up, so I kind of
Okay.
had like musical background in like elementary school, and then my dad, looking at it now, it was definitely like some midlife crisis shit. But he got a guitar when he was, I was maybe like 4 or 5, and he got a guitar for Christmas from my mom and was
Mm,
like, "Oh, I'm gonna relearn it." And I remember just picking it up like every day. And then after a couple of years of just like messing with it, my parents got me like, the like Toys R Us like starter pack guitars that come with like a baby amp. They got me one of those.
mhm.
And I just had no interest in learning it. I just wanted to play as hard as I could on it. And I learned like Brain Stew by Green Day and would just like punch the hell out of it.
Mhm.
Um, and I think from that, my parents were like, maybe you should try something else because you're not really getting better. You're just like, you're loving this, but you're not really learning it.
Right.
And I remember just being really into drums. I was a huge Blink 182 kid, so I looked up to Travis Barker a lot. And I remember asking my parents for a drum set for Christmas one year, and same thing, they got me just like a baby starter drum kit. And that's where it sort of felt natural. And I think in like 6th or 7th grade, they were like, you should take lessons and like actually learn this. Ever since then, I've been playing drums.
Yeah. It's like sometimes I wonder if you zoom out if you believe in a greater power or not, and like how many bands would have started if there was cool parents who were like, yeah, yeah, we'll get you drums, or like,
Yeah.
yeah, you can jam at our house. But like the fact, I feel like because hardcore or just drummers are such in short supply all around the world here, and some drummers are playing in 2, 3, even 5 bands at times.
Guilty.
Gil exactly, but like that initial starting point, like as a parent, is like so critical. And I understand,
Yeah.
like everyone's got a different living situation. Some people have different like tolerances when it comes to things like that. Like
Yeah.
I know my parents specifically, like I'm not a drummer by any means, but like if your house is like the jam spot, you are a drummer by proxy, just someone else
Yes.
hitting the drums. But yeah, like I feel like that initial thing, especially with a lot of drummers who have come on the podcast, is like that's the through line, is that like they had parents who are willing to have their whatever year old just like bang on the drums so bad, but in order to like maybe in time like be like a proficient drummer like yourself.
For sure. Yeah. And I don't know, like there were other kids who played drums in our friend group. It was always just like, hey, my parents aren't cool with it tonight. Hey, my parents aren't cool with it tonight. Nick, you're gonna play drums tonight. Because like I said, we were never like I never did like a real band in middle school or high school. It was
It was just
always
a
just sort
band
of,
of dudes just wanting to,
yeah.
yeah.
Um, so we would often swap instruments and try to learn songs on different instruments. But I kind of always just ended up being on drums.
Yeah, not by like choice at the time. It was more out of just necessity to play music.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so funny. So guitar doesn't seem to be going for it, but like the drums are. When was like that transition, like we were saying, from concert to show, and like was you playing in bands immediately, like right out the get-go, or was it like you started going to shows for a little bit and then started playing drums and something?
Yeah. So I really wasn't in any real bands until like 4 or 5 years ago. I was kind of just a kid that went to shows. I made a bunch of friends in high school who were more involved locally in music, and started going out to more like proper shows. And we were kind of just going to whatever. Like I said, there was a lot of like metalcore happening. There was a spot called the Ruins in Providence that would do a lot of like metalcore, like gent prog stuff. So we'd go to that. But my friends played in a couple um, like more screamo type bands. There's this band called Pathfinder that my best friend in high school played drums in. So every time they played locally, I was there. And then, I ended up lucking out and seeing a couple like accidental proper hardcore shows. Like I remember seeing Sick of It All and Negative Approach in Providence in 2014 and not really putting together how awesome that was. This band Reason to Fight played, which I didn't know at the time, but like it's members of Death Before Dishonor.
Okay.
So it was always, things were sort of always around me, but I wasn't like full fledged into it until shortly after that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like there's sometimes when you go to a show when you're young, but then you look back on, you're like, wow, like that was like so special. And then there's times
Yeah.
where you're older and you understand how special a show is, and the kids might be like, yeah, this is dope. But like, you're like, do you
No, you don't get
understand
it.
how-"
Yeah.
You're kind of shaking them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd say like 2014, 2015 is really when I like started to get hardcore and sort of really dove into things.
Mm-hmm. So kind of like fast forwarding a little bit here, because when Rachel came on, they were kind of talking about how the nature of how Anklebiter came together through their perspective. But I think it seemed like it was kind of like it was an idea of like, I want to be in a band, and then I know these other people who are in other bands. So I kind of want to ask the same question of how Anklebiter started, but like more from your perspective of how you're getting that request and then how the ball started rolling.
Yeah. So I think my perspective is kind of funny because it's rare that I share it, but it's very different from how it became a thing from Rachel and Evan's perspective. So Evan and I were playing in a band called Ultimatum for a couple of years at that point. We hadn't really done much. It was just sort of a thing we were working on. And I met Logan. They started really going to shows like once shows came back after COVID. And they were just around and friends with Evan. So we became friends. And then Evan had a lot of mutual friends with Rachel, and they kind of knew each other through the internet. And I guess Rachel and Logan were talking about starting a band, and Rachel randomly tweeted like, hey, who wants to start a band with Logan and I? Like, we want to do a band. And Evan replied and was just like, I'll do it. And they kind of thought it was like oh, cool. Like, we'll get to that eventually. And then I think either that night or the next day, Evan texted Rachel and was like, here's a demo with like the demo. And she was like, oh shit, like, I guess we have to do this. And the missing piece of the puzzle was a drummer because they had 3 members of a band otherwise. And I was in another band at the time called Pummel, which was, we were pretty busy. We were working on an LP and playing pretty often locally. So Evan was like, well, Nick's my usual go-to guy, but like, he's not going to want to do it. And they, I guess, went through like a bunch of other people like in their heads, and we're just like, fuck it. Let's just ask Nick. And I can't say no to being a band. So as soon as Evan texted me, like, I think his words were like, yo, new band ? And I was just like, yeah, we'll do it.
Yeah.
And that was it.
I don't need to hear any of the music or the name or the context of who's in it. Just, yep, sure.
I'll do it. And I think the next text was like, don't worry, like, it's your type of hardcore, like, you're going to love it. And then I was like, oh, okay, I'm fully in. And very quickly after that, a group chat was made, and it was like, cool, we're doing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It'd be it'd be very funny just to be like, yeah, sure, and then you get the link to the demo and you're like, I did not I didn't plan to sign up for the gent like progressive
Yeah.
in 2022, but here we are.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is funny too because like yeah, sometimes you like never know, like you might have a preconceived idea of like, oh, so and so's like really busy to do another band or do something else because whatever they got going on. But some people might be like, yeah, fuck it, like I got time, or I will make time depending
Yeah.
on everything attached to it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
but
our like friend group has so many like project bands that kind of don't exist, but our concept that we have like a small idea of what we want it to be, and like garage band songs working through it, that I kind of figured it was just going to be like, oh, this will maybe happen one day. I didn't expect it to be a band.
right. Yeah, Evan just literally was like, okay, the tweet's out. I have to get on GarageBand and fucking
Yeah.
get to work here, which I've done for other projects as well. It's like,
Yeah.
I find that that's the easiest way to get a new band going is like if someone just like, you know, does the gauntlet run of like putting everything together and then you tweak as needed from there. But
Exactly.
if you have one visionary, it's like a lot easier to get things started versus like, let's spend the next 8 weeks just like trying to put together a few songs and then we have to record and blah blah blah.
Yeah. And Anklebiter, I think from the jump, that sort of set the tone of the band, where we try not to take it too serious or think about things to, you know, the end of ourselves. We like to just sort of do whatever and, you know, do what feels right.
So since we're on that topic, like just to not to play devil's advocate, but it's like sometimes a bit of a slippery slope that some bands find themselves in, where it's like they'll have something. And I believe that people should start bands with lower expectations, just because
For
like
sure.
anything that does happen, if you get a fest opportunity or you get the ability to put it out on a label, like that just becomes even sweeter when you're actually doing it versus like you or like I will only be happy with this project if XYZ happens. But you know, naturally when, you know, there are things that do happen, because I think hardcore is like a music genre where it's like a band could be gone for like 3 to 5 years but put out an amazing record out of nowhere, and then they're kind of at the top of the conversation pile. So when you're just having fun and you're kind of doing stuff, like where's the Anklebiter line right now when it comes to like we're doing stuff that is fun and is like authentic to us and we're having a good time and not taking it seriously, but now we have to kind of be more considerate about, you know, how many shows we're playing, like what our like presence online is. Like, do you have a opinion when it comes to where the line is of like serious and like not serious and silly, but that's just the way I'll word it for now.
Yeah. I think in the early days, we didn't take it serious enough, where we were kind of just like shit posting online, and we were purposely kind of just being annoying and lame. And it was funny for us because it was like the band was a bit to us. But the second we started actually playing shows, we were like, oh, we shouldn't just be like tweeting the first thing that comes to our mind on the band account, or, you know, like posting memes on the Instagram story. And like, I'll respect the bands who do that. We would rather our personalities come out in like music and merch and stage presence and shit like that than online. And I think the shift in that was, you know, initially we were very much not going to be a band that played a lot of shows. I think the plan originally was to play like 2 shows a year. So a lot of our existence as a band was going to be online. And then the second we were like, oh, we're going to have to see each other like every weekend, like it's going to get old real quick if we're being this crazy online and this crazy in person. Like, let's just keep it to ourselves.
Yeah. But there's, you know, there's always like, even when a band kind of gets more serious, like you can still sprinkle in some goofy shit to like make, because like at the end of the day, like we play a type of music that just encourages people to like dance crazily and jump off the stage and like do all that stuff. So it's like it shouldn't be taken as like this is the most serious ass thing in the world. It's like, you know, like there is an aspect to it that does have meaning, but I think that we inject our own meaning into it. When you zoom out, anybody on the outside is like, what is this like
Yeah.
kids gone wild shit that I'm watching this right now.
Yeah.
You know?
We have a hard rule of thumb in Anklebiter that once we stop having fun, we're just breaking up. Like the number one, like the only rule we have in that band is it's for fun.
Yeah.
And we've been asked like, what's the objective of the band? Like, where do you guys want to see yourselves? And like, we don't have any of those. Like every day we wake up and there's like, what's the stupidest t-shirt we can do next month? Like, or like, we need a new sticker. Like we'll do logo stickers, but let's do a funny one too. Like we just want to have fun with the band. So, we might not be as outspoken online or anymore, but I think very much the objective of the band is still just to have fun.
Right. And I feel like a great example of being able to balance like the serious and the fun aspect is when you guys played Act Like You Know, which is now called Flyover Fest, and you guys did the 420 jerseys. And like I was like, man, this is so just perfect and on brand for you guys. But as soon as the Hey 5-6 video dropped and just seeing all the comments like, wait, isn't this a straight edge band? I was like, yes.
It works. It works. Yeah.
Exactly.
That was my stupidest and best idea I think I've ever had. Just because we kind of wanted people to be mad or like, we wanted it to be like, oh, these idiots, like you can't do that. And like, why can't we, it was funny in our heads, and walking into the room and seeing like 30 people wearing jerseys that said straight edge 420 on it was just, we were laughing about it all day because we were like, these idiots really bought these. And it was all our friends. So I'm comfortable calling them idiots. But I think that jersey is a good example of like the ethos of Anklebiter is, even though it's like a football jersey, it's still something funny and, you can laugh at it looking back.
Yeah. And going back to the beginning of the pod, like when you see something that like literally there will never be another band who does a straight edge 420 jersey.
Probably not.
Buy this right now. Probably not.
Yeah.
Have you seen, because I think it's a funny thing, or I think it's just a cool thing in general where you'll roll up at a show, maybe Anklebiter isn't even playing it, and you'll see, an Anklebiter shirt or hoodie or a piece of merch just kind of spread throughout. Maybe it's like a bigger show and it's like, well, that's like cool that I've seen a couple of those. Have you seen those 420 jerseys like in the wild, so to speak, or have they like? Yes. Okay.
We were just on tour
to different people's closets or anything.
No, we were just on tour. And I think it was, I want to say it was OKC. A couple kids pulled up in them and it was awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, are there any plans in the future for other jerseys, either for this year's flyover or anything else? Or are you like, maybe we chill on the jerseys for now?
So flyover, we're like, full disclosure, we don't have anything in stone yet, but we're trying to take it the same route this year. So we're trying to one up last year. That's all I'll say on that. Yeah.
Okay. We're gonna do like a tracksuit.
Maybe that's definitely an idea that's been floated. We have like, I'm not even being like mysterious guy. Like we haven't decided anything yet.
Yeah.
But I think the plan is to sort of, last year was so fun and just awesome for us that we want to, duplicate that experience for ourselves. Obviously it would be stupid to not. So we're trying to one up ourselves more or less.
Yeah. And I don't know. I think like, obviously, I've been a fan of your band for a long time, but I've also been a big fan of the fest in Tulsa and what Aaron has done, and like to know that he believed in you guys like so early on, even before the demo was even out, and then seeing like, for me, that was like easily like top 3 sets of the entire weekend.
Thank you.
And then get the re-invite for next year. It's like, it's just very cool to for someone who's more in that like for the underdogs kind of aspect to be able to be like, kind of creating his own connection points and lore between the band and the fest. So
Aaron, Evan's other band, Broken Vow, and my other band, Pummel, played the fest, obviously. So when we were working on like literally I think like the first 2 weeks of Anklebiter, and we had finally made like a Twitter and stuff for it. And we were like, we're going to be annoying. I think we DM'd Aaron from the Ankle-Biter account, and we're just like, hey, what if we played the fest? And he literally was just like, sure.
Yeah.
Like, fuck it. You guys seem cool. So yeah, the fact that that dude put us on the fest without even hearing music. And we were like, we'll send you music. Like, we promise this isn't like, we're not trolling you. This is going to be a band.
Right.
Just trust us on it. Once he heard the demo, he was like, oh, for sure, you're good. So
yeah, like much love to Aaron and all the friends I've made in Tulsa. It's pretty just wild to have made so many connections to people in a state that I never even thought I would visit, and just out of pure curiosity. So definitely excited for y'all for this year's fest for sure.
Thank you. I'm very excited. It's gonna be awesome.
Another theme that I see with Ankle-Biter is that, and I noticed this at the Flyover, or at Act Like You Know, now called Flyover, is that you guys on occasion, or I don't know how often this is, but you guys will play 2 covers and not just one.
Yeah.
And it's largely because you can't make up your mind of which one you want to cover. Is that correct?
Yeah, we played 4 in Atlanta the other day.
Which 4 did you do? That's a lot of covers.
So we opened with Time Ends by Marauder, which is really funny if you think about our band.
Sure.
And then Evan was sound checking with the riff to Medario Stomp by One Life Crew. Okay. And this dude, Zach, that was there was like, if you guys play that, I'm going to mosh like a dickhead. So we ended the Time Ends intro, and Evan was like, fuck it, let's do Medario Stomp. So we did Medario Stomp. We were doing Bust It by Righteous Jams anyways. And then kids were like one more song, and we had played pretty much the EP in full. So we did Cursed by Ceremony just to close it off.
Man, it's like, I think you guys might be onto something where it's like, we'll just do like little, like not like full song covers, because that's the whole thing when a band does a 4-minute like cover of something. Even if the song is so legendary, I'm like, oh, this is a lot of cover to get through.
I agree.
But when you can just kind of like out of nowhere bust a riff from like any band, but y'all are doing that and like doubling and doubling and doubling down on it with 4 like, you guys might be ahead of, maybe that will be something in the next little bit. But
that would be all if bands just started covering, like, I know it's a thing bands have done, and I don't think anyone's like talked about it really, but if you just start covering mosh parts, I think that's awesome.
I agree. I think it's just sick to be like watching a band you like, and then like Metallica just comes out of nowhere, and then like later in the set, like, I don't know, they do like Raining Blood as well, and you're like, damn, I'm like really getting treated well at this show when it comes to riffs.
There's this band that's not a band anymore from Rhode Island called Bulletproof Backpack. That was these like 16-year-old kids that they played like every show. And they just like, I can't describe them. They truly just did whatever they wanted. And at one of their last shows, they did Raining Blood, and they did not sound like Slayer at all. And when they started playing the riff, Evan and I were just like, oh, we're killing somebody. Like, this is the coolest thing we've ever seen. So yeah, if more bands start doing that, I'd be stoked.
Yeah. And especially like, to your point, like bands who are covering stuff that's well outside of their genre. Like, it could be something where it's like, you might play in standard, but you're covering something that's in like drop B or something. Yeah. Like doing a Hatebreed song or something. Like, why not?
Yeah. I don't know. I think it's really cool. And I think hardcore is in a place where there's that sort of elitism of you can only like a certain style of hardcore, or you can only like one thing, has gone away for the most part. And I appreciate a band more, or just people more, when I know sort of more facets about them. And, you know, when you look at Ankle-Biter, you know, you might think one thing or another, but like, we all love Marauder, but we all love Fall Out Boy. And we, you know, you can like whatever you want. And being able to showcase that, I think, is really cool.
So, like, I think a lot of the Ankle-Biter team skews a lot more on the younger side when it comes to just like ages and whatnot. Have you guys noticed when you guys have been playing shows that, I guess, the types of Ankle-Biter fans or just people who are vibing with you guys are of the same kind of demographic, or are you seeing that as well as people who are like well into their 30s, even 40s, who are like, oh yeah, I found you guys, like I really like that?
Yeah.
Like,
I think it skews sort of both directions where we have a lot of younger people coming out to shows, which is awesome. And sort of our mentality on that is like, if we can be somebody's gateway band that gets them into, a little deeper stuff, that's awesome. And, I could only appreciate being in that position for somebody.
Mhm.
And then we get a lot of people who skew a little bit older, who are just like coming out to shows, and then they'll hear us do like a mental cover or something and then be like, how do you guys know what that is? And we're like,
you weren't even born yet.
Yeah. And
Right.
we love that band. And that's the funny thing is like, I'm sort of the old head of Ankle-Biter. I've got like 5 or 6 years on everybody. But we did a Rival Mob cover for a bit. We've done a couple, and Evan usually intros it with like, this song came out when I was 4 years old. And people are always like, oh, and either walk away or get upset by
and
that.
then but you guys kill it, and then it's like, okay, well, props.
Yeah, they're cool. Yeah.
But I think that's very important to like to, because I think there is a bit of a challenge. Like, I think there's an unsaid challenge where it's like a new band who's coming onto the scene where it's like maybe they don't have as many years in like playing in bands or doing that, but it's like, showing the opportunity is like, I know my history and I know like where all this stuff comes from, and I appreciate it and I love it. I might have not been like conscious as a human being at the time when this dropped, but like I'm still going back and kind of giving my nod to it and like letting that influence me. It's not like a band that's starting now needs to like get the brownie points of all like the people who are like the old heads of the
for sure
of the genre. But I love seeing when bands, it's like the notion of like, well, it sounds like a 2022 hardcore band is like something that I think is like a little toxic, but at the same time, like I understand where that person is coming from. It's like, oh, this person got into hardcore through the Knock Looses, the Expires, like all that kind of stuff. But I think when a band can kind of come onto the scene that's new, but at the same time, like pay homage and like cover a lot of like the really like like the true classics, and kind of win over those jaded older motherfuckers. That's like, I think that's awesome to see.
Yeah. And that's never our goal with it. It's we don't really give a fuck what people think about us. Yeah. It's more just that's the era that we wanted to reference with this band, just because Evan and I love that style of hardcore so much. So it would be a disservice to us not to pay homage to that,
right?
And sort of do that for ourselves.
Yeah, and I feel like it's a well more minority kind of group of people that are kind of like not picky, but they're like, these bands need to prove it to me or whatever. And like, I don't want to give those people any more time of day than I already have. Because you even look at a band like Mind Force, who is inarguably like a super like A tier level band who will go out and like kill any festival. But like, even when I've spoken with Jay, it's like, we were all the old dudes that were like, are any of the young kids who are getting into this shit gonna fuck with us? So it's like the opposite side of the coin, where it's like, that band is beloved by lots of people that they've been going to shows to forever, as well as new kids who are getting into this, who are like seeing Excalibur played for the first time. They're like, wow,
Well, I think that it all sort of stems back to like who you are as a band and just as a person. Like, I don't know. I'm in hardcore because I love it, not because I have to prove anything to myself or anybody else. And I think that's, not to speak for anyone in Ankle-Biter, but it's the same thing. Like I said, we're just doing this to have fun and do something we love. And, once you get to a point where you're like, oh, I need to win this person over, I think you kind of lost the plot on why you're in it.
Yeah. So I want to talk about the new record, To Live and Withstand. It's been out. I was like, this new record, and it's the newest. It's been out for a minute here.
A couple months now.
So something I heard when you were on Jamie Orkay's podcast, friend of the show, shout out to Jamie.
Shout out Jamie. Yeah.
you were talking about how you changed the track listing on that album like 4 or 5 times.
Yeah.
And I obsess over that as well, where I'm thinking about flow and momentum and all those things. But I wanted to pick your brain about, what went into that process for you guys specifically.
Yeah. So since the demo was such like a fuck it, spur of the moment, Evan just wrote it. And I mean, he wrote 6 songs and 2 of them we didn't put on the demo, but the original batch of songs is what the demo is. That was just like, literally a night's work. We practiced once and then got that recorded. So there was no real work being put into that. Once we decided, all right, we're going to do an EP next, we really, really took our time and sort of figuring out what we wanted to put out instead of just writing something in a night and saying, fuck it, let's put it out. So I think there was like 16 or 17 tracks we had written.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That we sort of just played around with flow, how the record moved, parts that, a song would end a certain way and then it would begin a certain way, and that sort of clashed. And none of us really live close to each other. Evan and I are the only 2 people that live within like 10 minutes of each other. Everyone else is at least 2 hours, if not 5 hours away. So this is all over group chat. And the group chat was for, I'd say like 7 months, just like constantly lighting up with like, no, track 5 has to be track 7. And this part sounds way too close to this part. This song is slow and we need a fast song after it. And we definitely got in our heads a little bit, and I think we argued too much over it. But I'm happy with the outcome.
Yeah, like sometimes you really need to, if you as a group are willing to like literally tear something apart and put it back together like multiple times and not getting all like up in the business about like whose idea is like the ultimate winner at the end of the day. Like I try with majority of my bands, like I am a very like visionary and opinionated person on things, but like at the end of the day, I just want the best ideas to win. And I want that to be like a collective decision. But yeah, like that is something for any record. Like it could be like, it could throw the whole vibe off if you are having things go blistering ankle biter fast and then something a little bit more mid tempo and then you're back up. Like maybe connect those fast songs together and then have something to kind of like, the ending of a certain song could help set up the next song that's a little bit slower, way better. So I think it was definitely the right move to like get into the weeds about it, even if it felt like hair pulling at times.
Yeah. There's that Freedom song that starts with the snare part, and we were like, we want to start the record with an isolated drum part, and that was the only thing that we were like set on. Everything else had been debated for God knows how long until we finally made a decision.
And you're like, well, that's easy for me. I can do drum build any day of the week.
For sure. Yeah, that was fun to do, but otherwise we definitely hashed it out over a long time.
Mm-hmm. What's like, obviously I think a theme in the Anklebiter sonic sphere is like Rachel's like blisteringly fast, like just word vomit at times.
Yes.
But to match that is like blistering fast drum parts as well. So like how closely, like, because obviously there's ties between the drums and the bass of any band, like establishing the groove, but like it feels like your and Rachel's dynamic or connection is almost even more important. Am I off base saying that, or am I banging?
You're not off base. I've never really thought of it that way, but I think you're right. Straight up, before we recorded the demo, I didn't really know what Rachel sounded like. We had played a show before we recorded the demo, and I couldn't hear her at all. We practiced once and we couldn't, the PA was having issues, so I didn't really know what she sounded like, and was just sort of trusting the process. And I remember when we did the demo, and we're tracking stuff, I remember the first like line she did, I literally was like, what the fuck? Like that was crazy. And I think her vocal style has sort of, like you said, it sort of set the tone for the band. And like I don't think you'll hear a slow Ankle-Biter song anytime soon.
Mm.
So I don't think it's a conscious decision for us to sort of be in sync, but I think she very much does sort of fall into my flow of drumming. And when I'm fast, she's fast. When I'm doing a two-step part, she's still fast. And I sort of have to catch back up to her.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's different when it's a drummer's like maybe pushing the tempo a little bit versus like the vocalist is, and you're like, oh shit.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I sort of follow Rachel's lead more than she follows me.
Interesting. So you're a drummer who's like, I need a lot of vocals in my monitor. If anything, only vocals.
Yeah, not only vocals, but I definitely need to hear. Like
Right.
I very much play off everybody else. I can't just be in my head and sort of bang it out.
Sometimes what I like to do sometimes when someone is coming to the pod with like a big body of work is I always like to ask the overrated, underrated question. And usually it's
Yeah.
tied to their discography. But since Ankle-Biter has like, what, 10 songs released?
11, I think.
Okay. So yeah, double digits worth at the very least.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna hit you with the underrated, overrated, but not on Ankle-Biter songs, but more on drumming as a whole. So
Okay.
I want to know, in your opinion, what's the most underrated drum fill and what's the most overrated drum fill in hardcore in general?
Interesting. Huh.
It's a big question. So take your time.
Overrated, I think, is people doing like crazy rudiment shit. Like, go back to marching band. I don't care. Like, I'm a drummer because I like to hit hard and it's fun. I like all respect to people who learn jazz and shit. And like I was in wind ensemble in high school. Like I get it, but like that's not why I'm here. So when someone hits a crazy fill, I'll definitely be like, oh. But if their whole set is them just showing off, like I don't care.
Yeah. When you're a fill drummer, it's like, bro, you're playing in the wrong style of heavy music right now.
Yeah. And I think underrated. Hmm. Not to like play off that answer, but I think keeping it simple is underrated. I think a lot of people overthink their drum fills. And like, first thing that comes to mind is like the start of Break a Sweat by Mental. That's just like, cut. It's literally just like you hear that and you're moshing, like what song is coming in. So I think keeping it simple and keeping something that's easily recognizable is hard to achieve because people try to do crazy paradiddles and play around the kit when you could realistically do something that's 4 or 5 hits that somebody's going to remember for the rest of their life.
Right. Yeah. I think like anyone that is like a drummer who's like super practiced up and they can pull some of those moves, I want you to like sprinkle that in like the lightest amount versus like just dumping like a cup of sugar. And it's just like it kind of like spoils it might be sweet to you, but it kind of like distracts from what everyone else in the band collectively is doing.
Exactly. I'd rather somebody hit something crazy that maybe not everybody notices, but if you are a drummer, you're like, oh my God, I can't believe he just, did that when everybody else was paying attention to a guitar solo or, a bass part or something.
Right. Yeah. But I think I do agree with you that like I'm a fan when it's kind of like the super hard hit and then it's like into a buildup, but it like starts here and then comes down and then builds up like dun, 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 like that shit is like that will get my blood boiling and just like in the best way possible.
Yeah, and if you can make that interesting and keep it simple, that's even cooler. I think biased because he records everything Ankle-Biter does, but Will Hurst, who drums in Restraining Order, is like the master of that, where they'll do a build-up part and he'll hit a snare hit where you think he's just going to keep building on the tom, and it sort of activates that like monkey brain of like, I can't believe he did that.
Well, yeah, like the whole I was mentioning like the solo drum part at the beginning of the new record. Like I don't know, there is just something in I don't know if it's just like a human aspect of just like when you hear drums, like it's just such a primal instinct to just like,
Yeah.
especially in hardcore, just to like to start going like just ultra stupid. It's just as effective of like when you hear just the solo guitar chug part
Yep.
or the bass
Yes.
only. When something is isolated and it's like there's literally nothing else to pretty this up, it
You
like
know what to do.
yeah, it activates like the OG hardcore spirit, I think, in everyone.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was the goal with that song. Like we never are gonna play that song first. We just want to be able to sprinkle that somewhere into a set where a song ends and then it's immediately just tom hits. And
Yeah.
if you know what's happening, you're like, oh, I gotta move. Like it's time.
Yeah. That's funny that so you've never played that song first in a set?
No, I don't think we ever will.
Interesting. Because usually it's like when someone hears the first track of a record, you know, sometimes you'll kick off a set with that. But that's cool how you guys
Yeah.
are like, no, this is like almost like the hard reset to
Yes.
being in the middle of a set.
Yeah. Not even like we've been playing it second this summer playing shows, but we just want that as a fun little like we save it for a point in the set where we want to throw people off and if you know what's happening, you know what to do.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's very interesting. You got my
Because
brain.
we're not a band with mosh parts really. So we gotta sort of sprinkle them in where we can.
Right. So something else that I noticed that on you shared this on your Instagram super recently. So you visited the famous Minor Threat
House. Yeah.
and got to get the picture up there. Like, what did that mean to you as someone? I don't know how long you've been straight edge per se.
Yeah.
But it's always cool to see when bands or just people in hardcore get to like visit something, because there's not as many physical things that you can go see in hardcore aside from maybe venues that are still around of certain videos. Like it's really like outside of venues and maybe like certain places like where certain people have taken album photos or like it's shit like that.
Yeah.
So talk to me about like the importance and why that was cool for you specifically.
Yeah. So that was actually on the 5-year anniversary of me claiming Edge. And it's 5 years sober for me as well.
Mm-hmm.
Not to get like dark, but I was very much an alcoholic before I claimed Edge. So getting to go there on the day that I pretty much went sober was huge for me because without them, I wouldn't be straight edge. Minor Threat was a band I discovered early in my days of getting into hardcore, and I wasn't edge immediately after listening to them, but getting the context of how important they were to everything and sort of getting into Boston stuff like SSD, DYS, and finding out, without Minor Threat, there probably wouldn't have been those bands. Super important for me. So getting to see it on that day meant the world.
Yeah. And like, yeah, it's pretty surreal. Like, and I don't know much context about the house itself. And I'm more curious because I remember, I think this is totally different to a degree, but like the Breaking Bad house came up in a past podcast, and then the person told me that was like, oh yeah, the person that lives at the house is like doesn't want people come in, like calls the police. It's like all this,
really,
they have like a gate around the house so no one can even go and like take up a proper photo of it. So I don't know like the lore behind that house, if it's occupied, if people are like, oh yeah, like you can kind of do it. I don't know if there's anything you can share there for the listeners.
So as far as I know, it's occupied by somebody who's not affiliated at all with the band or Ian, but I believe Ian still has stuff from Discord Records there. And if he happens to like be there, he'll show you around, which is cool. But I think we like Googled a bunch of shit and made sure it was cool. I think the rule of thumb is as long as you're not like disturbing who lives there, you're kind of good to take the picture and leave.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't like go up to the front door or anything or like knock or see who was there.
Right.
We were on the road and it was kind of just like it was directly on our way to Baltimore. So we were like, we'll hop off the highway for 10 minutes, soak it in, and then get back on the road. So we all kind of just walked up, took the picture and left.
Yeah. And yeah, if there's already, it's not like that is just owned by some, whatever, like senior citizens that are just like, who are all these hardcore kids like coming up to
Yeah.
the house? It's like if there's already like records and just different stuff that's already a part of that, it's hopefully understood that's like, yeah, this like means a lot to certain people, especially people who like
Yeah.
who claim for sure.
We were on a run. My other band, Pummel, was on a run with Peace Test. I think it was last year, and they stopped on their way there and got to go inside and see a bunch of stuff. So I know you can go inside and see stuff. I just don't know how you do that.
Yeah. So again, we don't have to hit on this super hard if you don't want to, but you
Yeah.
were just kind of sharing. I think you might have been sharing even before we got going about how like, your experience, or I guess your past when it comes to just like dabbling in substances is a lot different to maybe some other people in the band.
Yeah.
And obviously it sounds very important to you to be able to like, like 5 years is a big deal. Like I think you should
For
be
sure.
able to, I remember when Scope turned 5 years and I was like, I want to put on the biggest fucking show to kind of celebrate this project that I've done.
Yeah.
So, as much as like we've been talking about how Anklebitter is like not a serious band, it is a straight edge band, and there are aspects of that should be taken seriously. So I guess like when it comes to maybe the new kids who are coming in and maybe discovering a band like Anklebitter, like what is kind of a personal thing that you're hoping people are taking away as far as why someone should consider a more sober or cleaner lifestyle when it comes to those things based on your own experiences?
For sure. I think specifically speaking in terms of Anklebitter, I think a lot of people can look at us on a surface level and just think like, oh, these are some kids just being silly and, having fun. But if you read Rachel's lyrics, they're very serious. A lot of them are very violent and personal. And specifically a couple tracks on the new record touch on, how drugs and alcohol have affected her life, maybe not through her own consumption, but just people around her.
Sure.
And things she's, had to experience. And, we are a straight edge band. We're all straight edge. And I think, having a history with drugs and alcohol in my own life, my family, et cetera, I hope a kid can see that straight edge doesn't have to look a certain way or have to be a certain thing. One of the realest things ever that I was told that was a huge part in me claiming edge and staying edge and, staying sober was you can't let anybody define your straight edge. You have to sort of define it for yourself. And, the straight edge is a concept that you have to wear your own way. It shouldn't be anybody else's way. So I think for Anklebitter, I want it to be sort of a beacon of light that, we reference these bands, we wear certain shirts, et cetera. We're all our own person, but you can do straight edge however you want as long as you're living a straight edge lifestyle. It doesn't have to look or be a certain way.
Yeah. So what, like, when it comes to like your specific, like, was that instilled in you when you were claiming like pretty early on, or did you kind of have to be reminded of that in the midst of like maybe being like, why am I arguing on semantics with other people who are edge or who are like giving me grief about X, Y, or Z?
Yeah. I think a little bit of both, to be honest with you. Like I have no shame in it. I've said it already on this podcast. Like I was an alcoholic. So for me claiming edge, it wasn't just me, like putting a flag in the sand and being like, I'm straight edge. It was also me struggling with sobriety. And that's a real thing that I still, deal with to this day. And I think, not only did I have sort of conversation with people who are straight edge about what being an addict and claiming edge looks like, I also had, conversations with people I was consistently partying with and going out with about what straight edge was. And, I was having all these sort of external conversations about the decision I was making. And ultimately that decision was for me, not, people on either side of that conversation. So I think centering my thoughts around, it was a decision for myself, not anybody else. And figuring out how I was going to live my life with that decision, is what meant the most to me and sort of what kept me grounded in making that decision.
Yeah. Like, I think for me, like as someone that like, it like has never claimed like straight edge, but like there was certain things where I was like straight edge by proxy in a sense where it was like,
Yeah.
like I didn't drink or do anything in that. Like, I still to this day have not done any like hard drugs aside from like just maybe like smoking weed once in a while. But like, I didn't even drink until I was like the age of 22.
Oh,
So
wow.
in the midst of that, it was a lot of like just me just being like, I think like that's not something that I'm like. At the time I was like, I was the oldest of my family, so I'm always like the goody two shoes. I'm like trying to,
Set the example.
you set the example, all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. So, there was many years where I couldn't even do that, even when that was like offered up to me. I'm like, nah, I'm good. And then I just had the attitude, it's like, there's just a lot of money and I'm not really about it. And like, in a deeper way, like, my mom also had like an abusive father who was an alcoholic as well. But I think
Sure.
it didn't really make sense to me. Well, it's not that it didn't make sense to me, but it really opened my eyes when I would hear stories, through interviews or different people on other podcasts where they talked about claiming edge, not out of necessity, but kind of out of necessity, where it's
For me,
like,
it was for sure.
yeah, yeah, where it's like I am someone that is like, if I have like, if there's a 6-pack of beer in the fridge, that's gone that night. And then
Mhm.
it kind of opened up my eyes like, oh, that's like a very real like struggle for a lot of people. And I think it's like, I have huge respect for anyone who has like made that life choice to like fully cut that tie and like, doing it through straight edge, and having that connection to other people who are either like who can fully relate in that same way, or if it's by proxy, like whether they
Yeah.
had someone else in their life who had the same addictive behaviors, but maybe they couldn't make a choice like that. Like, I think that's really, really powerful. And I think that should, it's, I like how you're saying how it's like, it should be an individual experience that people can connect on the commonalities and the differences within that.
Yes, for sure. Yeah. I think it's something that, I'm proud to be a part of this community that, we all share the same thing, but like, not to sound selfish with it, but like, I'm most proud of it for me. Cause like,
Sure.
I did it for me.
Yeah. Well, you should be most proud of
Thank
it for
you.
yourself, Like,
Yeah.
I don't think that should be something that you're like weird to flex on, because I don't think
Yeah.
it's, I think personal growth should be the biggest flex.
100%. I'm really not like a self-righteous person in most aspects of my life, but that's one thing that, I'm pretty firmly proud of.
Hmm. I have a question that just came to mind, and I don't think I've even asked this of anyone.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure like any straight edge band, there's like the not the, I don't know if you would view it as like a ceremony or like something that, Xing up kind of before a set. Is that
Hmm.
something that you guys are like intentionally doing together, or is it kind of like, I'll just do it on my own, or like, oh shit, we're about to play, I got to do this now? Like, talk to me
Yeah.
about how that is for yourself and just or even just when you're at a show in general.
Yeah. It's important for me. It's something that like I felt like I had to sort of earn in claiming edge because I'd been going to shows for years before I was straight edge. So I'd
Hmm.
seen kids X up and I claimed at 22 too. So I wasn't like a child. I was very much an adult when I claimed edge. So I didn't really X up for the first year of me being straight edge. And, now playing in a couple straight edge bands, it's something I try to do as often as I can. And I think with Anklebiter, not to like make light of it, but it's sort of unintentionally like a group activity because Evan sucks at doing X's. So we have to X up
He's like,
him.
someone's got
And
to X up for me, please.
no, he tries to X up other people, and we're like, no, dude, you're not doing it. So we end up Xing up each other so he doesn't have to do it.
I see. Is he just
So
trying like squiggly lines versus a straight line, or what up?
he may as well be like, no shots at Evan. I love him, but he just can't do it. One's crooked, one's not as thick as the other one.
Okay.
And
Too many
we end up,
inconsistencies.
yes, yeah,
Yeah.
yes. So we end up just fixing ours for each other anyways. So at this point, we'll usually get to a show, load in, and then if we remember to do it, we'll do it as soon as we're set up. If not, we do it right before we play.
Got you. Has there ever been a time where you've forgotten?
Yes, yeah, for sure. It's not like an every show thing. And if it's not, it's just because we forgot and we're busy. But Usually somebody has a Sharpie on them, and if it's on our person and you remember it's in your pocket, it's all right, gather everybody up, we're doing it.
Mm-hmm. What's the best Sharpie to use
Oh, the
for
King Fat Sharpie.
the King Fat Sharpie? Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, because
that's the
sometimes I see
best.
people with like the super thin and they're like really going at it. I was like, I think
Yeah,
you need a thicker Sharpie, my friend.
yeah, I'm a fan of thick X's. I think the thin X's are cool sometimes because it looks, if you see it and it's sort of faded and you're like, oh cool, I see it. But wear it loud and proud. Get it as big and thick and annoying as possible
And
in my
annoying
book.
as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. It's cool like that you're open to kind of talk about this like
Yeah, for sure.
because I think that there's like just kind of some general curiosities that I've had about a lot of this that are just kind of I've just been outside of it and it's not something I've been like. So, it would feel weird if you're in the midst of that. I was like, what Sharpie are you using,
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think just like addiction and sort of alcoholism is stigmatized, obviously, but in terms of straight edge, I think there's this sort of, veil of like, oh, fuck drugs and alcohol, like don't even talk about them. But like it's something I've had to deal with and live with. It's something a lot of people have had to deal with and live with. And to not talk about them or be open about them is just, it's one, being dishonest, but two, I don't know, hopefully, if somebody hears this and they're dealing with that themselves and have been thinking about claiming a straight edge or are straight edge and are struggling with the same thing, it's, you can still do it. And, there's light at the end of the tunnel for everybody.
I noticed on your Instagram that you have a video from Bam Margera saying that he wants to know who Nick Birtles is. So I was like, what is this, a cameo or like is there like a deeper lore to that? Like what's up with
that was a cameo.
Okay.
There's this inside joke, not so I do a lot of like merch design and stuff like that. And in Providence, we have this thing called PVD Fest that's just like they would shut down the city for a couple days, block off the streets, and everyone would just walk around and hang out. And restaurants would do outside stuff, and it was this big like arts music thing.
Mm-hmm.
And every year, I would make a shirt that just said "Who the hell is Nick Birtles?" in a different sort of rip or something. And I'd sell them to friends and donate all the money to charity. And it was just sort of like a running thing around Providence where people would say, "Who the hell is Nick Birtles?" And when we were getting like the stimulus checks from COVID, on one of them was just like, "Who's the funniest person I can get to say that?" And I was a huge Bam Margera kid growing up. I love Jackass. I loved like Viva La Bam and Element skateboards and all that shit. So yeah, that was like a quick $50 that.
$50, that's not too bad for
Yeah,
Bam.
exactly.
I'm sure his prices have gone up a lot since then.
Probably, yeah. But yeah, like 3 weeks into COVID, it was $50 out of a whatever amount of check. I was like, the rest I'll save. This is going to be the best $50 I ever spent. So, yeah.
I mean, and this is all like prior to ANKLEBITER even starting. So
yeah,
like if anything, the journey of maybe Bam being like, I know who the fuck
yeah.
actually might come to fruition. Stranger things have happened.
I'll DM him. I'll DM him the EP or something and see what he has to say.
Dude, if that happens, you have to let me know so I can just clip this episode and be like, look, we called it into existence.
That would be crazy. I just for the bit when we rap later, I'm gonna just send his Instagram a link to the demo or something and just cross our fingers.
Cross every finger. Everyone who's listening, cross your fingers. I don't care if you're driving, throw them up. Would you say Bam's your favorite skateboarder? One of.
I think growing up, Rodney Mullen was my favorite skateboarder. Big Eric Costin head. I liked Mike Valley a lot. Like a lot of the Tony Hawk fucking like standard characters I looked up to.
Not like the Darth Mauls standard characters of Tony Hawk.
Jar Jar Binks is my favorite skateboarder.
Yeah, man, there's is that T2 or T3? Because there were some wild characters from that game.
I think Darth Maul was 3.
Yeah, I think so. Because I played. Yeah, he's. Yeah, he's Pro Skater 3.
Cool.
Dude. Air, hang time, ollie, and speed stats were just maxed out.
Yep. That's so awesome.
It's funny too, because like in the, I don't know if you remember in like the loading screen where you would select him, there's a guy behind in the skate shop behind the counter, and he starts like getting force choke.
Yeah.
He's just dangling in the background.
Yes, I remember that. That is so awesome.
Yeah. It's funny because before I got 3, I had the opportunity to buy a game for my N64 with like my allowance or whatever, and it was Pro Skater 2 and Pokemon Stadium. And like I dabbled in skateboarding and some of that, but it never like, I always like admired it from afar, but I was like, that's not really my thing. And it's because in that moment I chose Pokemon Snap, or not Snap, Pokemon Stadium. And I got like fucking plushies, and like I watch people do Nuzlocke all the time. So I feel like my life would have gone in a totally different trajectory if I bought 2. Like I would have decks and everything set up. But
Pokemon Stadium's underrated though. That's one of my favorite Pokemon games.
You think it's underrated?
Yeah. I don't hear it talked about much.
Yeah, I feel like underappreciated for sure. But yeah, I do think it's probably underrated. I've been watching.
And good mini games too.
Dude, fantastic mini games.
Yeah. What were you saying? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
I watched a streamer that I like where he did essentially it's like you run the stadium gauntlet, but what he did is he randomized his team every single time. So he would randomize his team and get like anything from like, oh, this could actually do something to the most dog shit team, but he has to like carry out with that team. So he would have like 3 Magikarps, a Nidoran male, Ekans, and a Charizard. And you're like, well, that Charizard's going to get used, and then everything else is just going to bite the dust. But yeah, Pokemon Stadium, I guess it is underrated. I feel like a lot of people, when they talk about 64 games for Pokemon, they'll talk about Snap, but not Stadium. Yeah,
we even in ANKLEBITER, like we're varying levels of Pokemon heads. And I think just recently we had the conversation where we were rating our favorite games and like talking about our first Pokemon games. And I don't think anybody mentioned Pokemon Stadium.
What was your first?
My first was Red, believe it or not. Okay. I'm like an OG to some degree on that.
Yeah, you're clearly the older the ANKLEBITER folk, and they're like, I got platinum, and I'm like, that's when I was like getting out of it, because I had Yellow and Crystal and Ruby and all those games. I've only like kind of like gotten back into it in recent years, and honestly, like if I ever like was doing anything like video game like streaming wise, like I would probably exclusively play Pokemon games. I think
that's awesome.
I've made that decision.
I really don't play games much anymore. Like if I do, it's Fortnite or Call of Duty. But I keep telling myself when I have a good chunk of time off, I'm gonna go back and just replay the entire series.
Dude, I would love to see like an ANKLEBITER, like 4 players all like battle, like a 4-way battle between all of y'all, and like everyone's got its own team and everyone's
honestly, Logan's kicking everybody's ass. I think they're the one that they play Pokemon Go every day.
Oh, interesting. I feel like they would get along really well with Jordan, because Jordan, like all this past weekend, was like, don't expect me to work on anything scope related because Pokemon Go Fest is like bumping.
Yep.
And that's where I'll be with 2 phones. I'm like, okay, dude, like you live your life. Jordan,
there was a pretty big show in Massachusetts on Saturday, and they were like, I'm not going.
I got mons to catch. So Nick, this has been a pleasure having you on the show, bro. I think the very last thing that I like to ask you, that I ask every guest who comes here on the show, is a favorite Mosh-related story that they would like to end on. So that's anything that's first your head, wholesome, gruesome, ANKLEBITER show or not, however Mosh-wise you would like to send us off on.
For sure. First thing that comes to mind is Flyover Fest last year, formerly known as Act Like You Know. Um, Tyler Short and I had like a mosh off, more or less, where we were kind of just moshing to every band. And then it became a thing where like, hey, we're both moshing to every band. Like, let's start keeping count. And I think I beat him by like 5 or 6 bands.
Mhm.
And like, I love that dude. That dude's pretty much the reason why I claimed Edge. So to be able to be like, I moshed to more bands than you at that fest was awesome.
Yeah, like it is funny when Tyler's like, I've been moshing to every band this weekend, and especially when it's like a festival that I'm filming, and I'm like, I can attest because like sometimes he's one of the only people that I'm relying on for like the mosh pan
Yeah.
to or things like that. But yeah, the fact that he's doing that um at his wise age, I'll say that
Yes.
is very impressive. Love that
Yeah.
man as well. He is like, in my opinion, like he is the person that I hope that I can be like in continuation of like being in this scene by the time I'm his age. He's just very
I
inspiring
agree.
to me.
Yeah. He's been supportive of like all of my bands, all of our bands in New England. Like super supportive of Ultimatum as well, which is cool because that band doesn't really do much. And like at the fest last year, Evan got up and played a part in Pummel so I could hop off and mosh just so I could get another band on the list for that.
Yeah. Oh, just for that reason?
No, it's like a funny bit we do anyways, but like that day I was like, all right, we have to do it because I need to get another band on the scoreboard.
That's so funny. Well, whether you're moshing to beat out old Tyler Short or something else, we encourage that. Nick, again, it's been a pleasure chatting with you, bro, and learning a little bit about your story. All the links to all your bands and yourself will be in the description and the show notes. If there's anything you want to shout out, anything you want to plug, or anything you want to send the people off on.
Yeah. Shout out you. Thank you for having me on the show. Shout out Broken Vow, new record coming out soon. Mm-hmm. New Anklebutter stuff is in the works. We're playing a bunch of shows this fall, playing Tulsa in November, and then we'll be taking a little break to write an LP, which will hopefully be out within the next year or so. Cool. New Ultimatum EP, one of my other bands coming out very, very, very soon on a record label that you might like. So be on the lookout for that. And yeah, I don't know, start a band, learn drums. We've got enough fucking everybody else, enough guitarists, learn drums. Right. That's all I gotta say.
Or be a good parent and let your kids play drums in your house.
Yeah. If you have kids, buy them a drum kit.
Exactly. So, dude, again, thanks for the great chat, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. You as well. I appreciate you.